They say hindsight is 20/20, but when you've spent years second-guessing your own gut, even clarity feels like a betrayal. My name is Clara Grayson. I'm 34 years old, and for the better part of a decade, I believed that loyalty meant silence, that compromise was a virtue, and that a good wife absorbs discomfort like a sponge so her husband doesn't have to. I thought I was doing everything right, until I realized I was the only one playing fair in a game I never agreed to. When I first met Evan, I was the kind of woman who gave grace before it was asked for. I believed that patience solved most things, that tone mattered more than content, and that if someone you love hurt you, the first step was to understand their pain before your own. Evan was magnetic in that quiet, brooding way, never cruel, never loud, never violent. But his absence was loud. His dismissals were surgical. His affection came like rations, just enough to keep me hopeful, never enough to make me full. We met when I was 26 and fresh out of grad school, working in social work and running myself ragged trying to fix everyone's messes but my own. Evan was a software engineer with a minimalist wardrobe and a penthouse smile. He said I calmed him down. I thought that was a compliment. We moved in together in less than a year, married in less than 2. The first few months were tender, thoughtful, careful in that dance you do when you're still discovering each other's edges. But somewhere between our second anniversary and the 5th time his sister accidentally left me out of a group photo, I started to feel like wallpaper in my own life, pleasant, forgettable, and easier to ignore than to replace. Tasha, Evan's sister, has always had the kind of confidence that people mistake for warmth. She has this laugh that draws people in, and a way of speaking over you that feels like a hug until you realize she's not listening. She was in our lives constantly, Sunday brunches, midweek texts to Evan about checking in, frequent sleepovers at our apartment when she broke up with yet another toxic boyfriend. She always called me sis, but it felt performative, like she was saying it for the audience rather than for me. At first, I chalked it up to sibling closeness. I didn't want to be the insecure wife who couldn't handle family dynamics. But little things added up. When Evan and I bought our house, I found out Tasha had already seen it, twice, before I did. When we decorated, she helped him pick the color scheme, then told me it was neutral enough for someone like me. At dinner parties, she'd make jokes at my expense, about how I was so sensitive, or always needing a minute to process, and Evan would laugh along. Light-hearted teasing, I told myself. I should lighten up. That became the theme of our marriage, me feeling something, Evan dismissing it, and me folding in on myself until I couldn't remember the shape I used to be. He wasn't unkind, not technically. He remembered my birthday. He held my hand at his dad's funeral. He never shouted. But he stopped asking me how my day was. He stopped noticing when I switched shampoos, when I wore a new dress, when I lost weight from the stress of carrying 2 emotional loads in a marriage built for sharing. I once brought up how lonely I felt in therapy, our first and only couple session. Evan said I had a tendency to overanalyze and that maybe I should work on being less reactive. Tasha chimed in later that night via text to him, saying, "Tell Clara to journal or do yoga or something. You've got enough on your plate." That was when I started hiding parts of myself, not out of deception, but out of defense. I stopped telling Evan when I got raises. I stopped showing him the stories I published online. I stopped inviting him to the gallery where I volunteered because I couldn't take another eye roll masked as disinterest. His apathy wasn't just neglect, it was strategy. He made me feel like my emotions were interruptions, my needs were impositions, and my presence was peripheral. Still, I stayed. I told myself I loved him. I did. Or maybe I just loved the idea of the version of us I thought we could still become. But things hit a new level when we started trying for a baby. Evan was lukewarm. He said he was open to it in theory, but when I went off birth control, he stopped initiating. Tasha made jokes about how we all know Clara's clock is ticking, and Evan just smiled. When I brought up fertility consultations, he told me I was being dramatic. Let it happen naturally, he said, while making sure it never could. Around that time, his work hours got longer. Or so he claimed. He stopped coming home before midnight. He slept in the guest room more frequently, citing my tossing and turning as a problem. And yet, every morning, he kissed me on the forehead and called me sweetheart. Emotional abuse doesn't scream. It whispers. It makes you believe that the sharp pain in your chest is just anxiety. That your growing silence is just maturity. That your tears in the shower are just hormones. Until one day, it's your birthday, and your husband forgets entirely. Not because he's busy. Not because he's overwhelmed. But because he doesn't care enough to remember. And when you bring it up, he tells you, you put too much stock in dates, then walks out to meet Tasha for brunch. The turning point came a few weeks after that, during a family barbecue at Tasha's house. It was a warm Sunday in July. Everyone was laughing, eating, playing cornhole in the backyard. I brought a homemade fruit tart, something Evan used to love. He didn't even glance at it. When I walked over to join the group, Tasha was telling a story about Evan's college conquests, and how he used to date these wild artsy girls who were nothing like Clara. Everyone laughed. Even Evan. I stood there, holding a plate of food I no longer had the appetite for, and realized no one noticed the way I flinched. No one cared. I was invisible, except when they needed someone to clean up the mess, buy the gifts, or play the hostess. That night, I didn't cry. I didn't even speak. I just lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, and made a decision. I wasn't going to scream. I wasn't going to beg. I was going to start writing everything down. Every slight. Every financial discrepancy. Every comment that twisted the knife just a little deeper. I wasn't planning to leave yet. I wasn't even sure I could. But I was done doubting myself. I was done pretending that love meant erasure. I would not be the shadow in my own marriage. Evan didn't notice that shift. That was his mistake. Because while he kept dismissing me, while Tasha kept whispering behind her wine glass, while the rest of the family kept laughing at jokes I was no longer in on, I was waking up. And when I finally act, it won't be loud. It won't be violent. It'll be surgical. Precise. Devastating. Because the quiet ones? We take notes. The thing about intuition is that it doesn't shout. It hums. Soft and low, like a wire pulled too tight behind your ribs. And for a long time I mistook that hum for anxiety, for hormones, for the cost of being too sensitive as everyone so lovingly called it. But one night, that hum became a scream I could no longer ignore. It started with something so small it could have passed unnoticed. Evan had left his phone on the kitchen counter while he showered, which wasn't unusual. He wasn't paranoid like that. In fact, his indifference to secrecy had always been his alibi. What do I have to hide? He'd laugh if I ever glanced too long when his phone lit up. But that night, as I poured myself a glass of water and leaned against the cool granite counter, his phone buzzed twice, then again, and the name that flashed on the screen was Jay. Only it wasn't Jay. Jay didn't send peach emojis at 11:47 p.m. on a Wednesday. Jay didn't follow that with a string of hearts and a message that simply read, "Still thinking about that rooftop. I can still taste you." My first reaction wasn't anger. It wasn't even heartbreak. It was denial. I stood there, the condensation from my glass sliding down my fingers, and I told myself it had to be a prank. A spam message. Some kind of mistake. Maybe he was part of a group chat. Maybe Jay was an old friend being crass. Maybe. The phone lit up again. This time, a photo. Not explicit, but unmistakably intimate. A hand, a hip, a strand of hair curled around a finger in a way that screamed familiarity. And that's when I felt it, the soft, almost gracious departure of denial from my chest. He was cheating. There was no room left for excuses, no backdoor for benefit of the doubt. He had invited someone else into the private space we used to share. And as the shock settled into my bones like winter wind, I realized I wasn't breathing. The shower was still running. I could hear him humming, a habit he reserved for good moods. And that enraged me more than anything else. That he was in my house, with my towels, humming like a man content with a life he'd shattered. I didn't check the messages right away. I couldn't. I stood frozen, glass still in hand, phone still lighting up, as the truth whispered its way into every dark corner I had tried so hard to ignore. Eventually, I set down my glass and walked to the bedroom, mechanically, like muscle memory had taken the wheel. When I heard the bathroom door click open, I feigned sleep, curling under the covers as if hiding under cotton could shield me from the collapse of my reality. He crawled into bed, damp and warm, pressed a kiss to my shoulder, and whispered, "Love you, babe." I didn't move. I didn't respond. But I felt something inside me fracture in that moment. A crack so deep it echoed. The next morning, Evan left early for a supposed team meeting, and I waited until I heard the garage door close before I retrieved his phone from the dresser drawer. He had a backup one, a cheap Android I had always assumed was for work emergencies. But that morning, I held it in shaking hands and typed in the passcode. It was my birthday. That was the code. I don't know why that broke me the most. The fact that the key to his hidden life was the date I came into this world. The messages were there. Hundreds. No pretense, no attempt at secrecy beyond using a different phone. Photos. Voice notes. Coordinated hotel bookings. Restaurant reservations at places he said were too trendy for us. And worse than that? The tone. The way he spoke to her. Gentle. Playful. Present. The kind of man I hadn't seen in years. He remembered her coffee order. He sent her good morning texts with little affirmations. He sent her poetry, when I couldn't even get him to sign birthday cards without prompting. But the gut punch didn't come until I found the thread labeled Tasha. At first, I thought it was normal sibling chatter. Updates. Logistics. But as I scrolled, the bile began to rise in my throat. They weren't just chatting. They were planning. Plotting. Laughing at me. One message from Tasha read, "Did she really try to wear that hideous blue dress again? I swear Claire is stuck in 2009. Poor thing thinks she's edgy." Evan had replied, "She means well. She just bores easy. I tell her we're busy at work so I can have a night off without the guilt trip." Another message, "You're gonna have to act shocked when it all comes out. She's still convinced we're the good guys. Honestly? She deserves a better villain." They weren't just deceiving me. They were constructing a narrative, painting me as the oblivious, overbearing wife who would somehow deserve the betrayal. They were rewriting history before it had even ended. And suddenly everything made sense. The little jokes at dinner. The sideways glances when I brought up plans. The way Evan always knew how to steer me off track when I got too close to a truth I hadn't yet named. My body went numb. I sat on the floor, surrounded by receipts of a life I never agreed to live in. My knees pressed into the hardwood, and still, I didn't feel the pain. I just stared at the screen, reading and rereading every message until the words lost meaning and became daggers. The grief didn't come all at once. It arrived in waves, sometimes sharp, sometimes dull, always unforgiving. It was like watching someone you love drown in slow motion, only to realize you're the one underwater and everyone else is on the shore, sipping cocktails and pointing at how you flail. By noon, I had called out of work, told them I had a migraine, and sat on the back patio with a blanket wrapped around my shoulders, trying to feel the sun on my face. But everything felt artificial. Like I was playing dress-up in someone else's life. I couldn't cry. Not yet. There was too much venom sitting on my heart. Too much shame. I had let them twist me into something docile. I had handed over my trust and watched them carve it into a joke. I thought about the years I spent defending Evan to my friends, telling them he was just tired, just private, just a little disconnected. I thought about all the family gatherings where Tasha would hug me tight and whisper sis while stealing my husband with the same hands. They weren't sorry. Not even a little. They were smug. Emboldened. Certain I would never fight back because I never had. But they had underestimated me. Because something had cracked inside me, yes. But what they didn't realize was that underneath all that patience, all that grace, all that gentle restraint, I was someone who remembered everything. I didn't scream. I didn't text Evan. I didn't send Tasha a single word. Instead, I pulled out a notebook. A plain black Moleskine I had been gifted years ago and never used because nothing in my life had felt important enough to record. That day, I started writing. Passwords. Dates. Locations. Message screenshots. I organized everything chronologically. I created a timeline. I didn't know exactly what I was going to do yet, but I knew it would be deliberate. Precise. And absolutely unforgettable. I wasn't going to be the woman who sat quietly while her marriage was cannibalized by convenience and cruelty. I was going to be the woman who remembered. And when the time came, I would make sure they never forgot either. When a person breaks slowly, it's not a spectacle. It's quiet. It's surgical. It's watching yourself dissolve in real time and deciding, in one last lucid breath, that you won't let it kill you. You'll let it refine you. The morning after I read the messages, I made him breakfast. Scrambled eggs with chives, buttered toast, and a side of the thick-cut bacon he claimed made mornings bearable. I even set the table with cloth napkins, the ones embroidered with little blue thistles that Tasha once called quaint. I played the part so well I almost believed it myself. Evan walked into the kitchen still half asleep, wearing the sweatshirt I bought him on our anniversary trip to Asheville 2 years ago. He smiled the way you smile at a pet who brings you something dead from the yard. Surprised. Mildly amused. Slightly uncomfortable. "This is unexpected," he said, rubbing his neck like he was easing guilt out of his muscles. I poured him coffee, just the way he liked it, too much cream, never enough sugar. "Thought we could use a calm morning," I said with a smile so even it felt like armor. He didn't question it. Why would he? In his mind, I was still the Clara who folded towels into perfect thirds, who planned his dentist appointments 6 months ahead, who turned away whenever the room got too cold. I let him believe that Clara was still here. But I wasn't. Not really. What stood in my place was something else entirely. Not rage. Not despair. Something sharper. Colder. Focused. I played my part beautifully over the next few days. I let him touch me. I asked about his meetings. I even laughed at a story he told me about Tasha's new dating app disaster. I nodded sympathetically when he claimed she was so bad at relationships. That one nearly broke me. But I didn't flinch. Because I had already decided I would not be confronting him. I would not scream. I would not cry. I would not beg for scraps from the feast they'd been gorging on behind my back. Instead, I would set the table myself. And they would eat everything I served them, every bite, every word, every frame. The opportunity came faster than I expected. 3 days later, I received a chipper, overly punctuated group text from Tasha. "Party popper, hey fam. Hosting a family unity barbecue next weekend. Let's show that love wins. Sparkling heart Clara, could you put together a little slideshow of our family moments? Would be so cute during dinner." I stared at the message for a long time, letting the audacity soak into my skin like a second-degree burn. She wanted me to curate the image of this family. She wanted me to dig through our history, to decorate their lives with the illusion of harmony. And I said yes. Of course I said yes. Because it wasn't just a request, it was an invitation. One they didn't realize would become the stage for their very public execution. I spent the next week preparing. Not just emotionally, but tactically. I didn't delete anything. I saved it all, to multiple drives, cloud storage, and even a thumb drive hidden inside a hollowed-out book Evan had once gifted me for our 4th anniversary. "So you'll never be without stories," he had said. The irony was sweet enough to choke on. I started with old photos. Birthdays. Holidays. The kind of cheesy snapshots that evoke nostalgia and erase tension. Evan and I cutting our wedding cake. Tasha holding her goddaughter at our niece's christening. Evan's parents dancing in the backyard under string lights. I wanted the first 5 minutes of the slideshow to feel warm, familiar, tender. I wanted to lull them into comfort, like the second act of a play just before the twist. Then I started layering in the rot. A screenshot of the text where Evan said, "I can't believe she wore that dress again. I can barely look at her." Another from Tasha, "She still thinks you're just working late. It's almost cute." Photos of Evan with the mystery woman, screenshot from a restaurant's tagged photos on social media. Different angles, same shirt, same necklace he claimed he lost. And finally, a voice memo I recovered from his backup phone. One I had missed initially. His voice, slurred, low, "Sometimes I wish she'd just leave. Would make everything easier. But she won't. She still thinks I love her." The last frame I chose was a still image. One I had taken by accident, or maybe not. A blurry reflection of me in a window, eyes vacant, holding 2 wine glasses while waiting for a husband who never showed. I set it to fade out to silence. I didn't attach a title. I didn't add captions. I wanted the story to tell itself, and it did. With terrifying clarity. The day of the barbecue arrived with sunshine and forced smiles. Tasha's backyard was decked out in pastel streamers and mason jars filled with too perfect lemonade. Her laugh cut through the air like a knife. "Clara, you look amazing," she chirped, air-kissing me like we hadn't texted just that morning about the slideshow. Evan greeted me with a kiss on the cheek and an extra squeeze, like he was reassuring himself that I hadn't changed. And in a way, I hadn't. I was still quiet. Still smiling. But I wasn't soft anymore. I was steel under satin. "Slideshow's ready to go?" he asked, eyes scanning the backyard for something, or someone. "Queued up on the drive," I replied. "Just let me know when it's time." That time came just after the ribs and before dessert. Tasha tapped her glass with a spoon and declared, "Okay everyone. Before we get to the s'mores, we have a very special surprise." Clara put together something beautiful to remind us what family's all about. Applause. Laughter. Someone shouted, "Let's go, Clara." I stepped to the projector quietly. Inserted the drive. Clicked play. The opening notes of some soft, acoustic song filled the speakers. The first few photos drew a chorus of "Us" and "Oh my God, look how young we were." Tasha leaned against Evan's shoulder. He wrapped an arm around her waist. Perfect. Minute 3. A slight change in tone. A photo of Evan with the woman from the texts, framed like an accident, nestled between 2 shots of our anniversary trip. A few murmurs. Confusion. Whispers. Minute 4. The screenshots. Messages with timestamps. Emojis. Laughter. Cruelty dressed in casual text bubbles. The crowd stilled. One man cleared his throat. Someone gasped audibly. Tasha stepped forward, panic blooming behind her lip gloss smile. "Clara," she said, low and urgent, "what the hell is this?" But I wasn't looking at her. I was watching Evan. His eyes had widened. Not in shock, he had known, of course, but in horror. Because this wasn't just exposure. This was dissection. This was everyone seeing it. Not as gossip. Not as a misunderstanding. But as fact. The final frame appeared. The silence settled. No music. No words. Just my reflection, ghost-like and steady, holding 2 wine glasses in a window of absence. I turned off the projector. The hum died. "Thank you all for watching," I said, voice even and cold. I thought it was time the truth had a seat at the table. And then, I left. No yelling. No crying. Just the click of my heels on patio stone and the hollow silence of a party that would never recover. There's a peculiar kind of silence that follows betrayal when it is dragged, unfiltered and undeniable, into the light. It is not the shocked hush of surprise, nor is it the reverent quiet of solemnity. It's sharper, more jagged, a silence that cuts deeper than any shout, because it is born not of misunderstanding, but of undeniable comprehension. That was the silence I conjured. The backyard looked like something out of a catalogue: checkered tablecloths, mason jars filled with lemonade and cut lemons that served no practical purpose, tiki torches that flickered like smug little sentinels guarding a lie. Tasha had outdone herself, as always. Her talent for optics was unrivaled. She knew exactly how to stage a scene, how to charm a room, how to plaster a smile so believable it could pass a polygraph. But what she didn't know, what neither of them knew, was that I had spent the last few days preparing not just my presentation, but my exit. I wore a pale green dress that brushed my ankles, soft enough to whisper but sharp enough to move like intention. It wasn't a statement piece, but it didn't need to be. I wasn't here to make noise. I was here to end it. As the guests began to arrive, I moved like water, filling space but leaving no trace. I hugged the aunts who always smelled of lavender and whispers, nodded at the uncles whose approval had always felt conditional, offered small smiles to cousins who once laughed when Tasha called me needy at Thanksgiving. I was civil. Measured. Present without invitation. They welcomed me out of habit, not warmth, and I let them. Evan was already on his third beer when I arrived. He waved from the grill like nothing was different, like he hadn't spent the past 6 months deleting text chains and hiding burner phones in his glove compartment. Tasha, in white denim and a pink off-the-shoulder blouse, was circling the party like a hostess on speed, offering sangria and self-congratulation in equal measure. She beamed when she saw me. "Clara. You look incredible," she said, arms outstretched in mock sincerity. "I was worried you'd be too busy to make it." I stepped into her hug, placed my hand lightly on her back, and whispered so only she could hear, "I wouldn't miss this for the world." She pulled back, her smile faltering for half a second. She didn't know why. Not yet. The sun sank slowly as people settled into their seats for dinner. Laughter rose over the clinking of glasses and the occasional shriek from kids chasing bubbles across the lawn. And then, just as the first hint of twilight painted the sky gold, Tasha stood and tapped her glass. "Before we dig into dessert," she announced, her voice syrupy with control, "I just want to say how grateful I am that we're all here together. Family means everything, and there's no bond stronger than blood and chosen love." The crowd murmured agreement. Evan nodded beside her like a man who believed he belonged at the head of a table built on lies. And then, she gestured toward me. "Our sweet Clara has put together something special, a little journey down memory lane. I haven't seen it either, so we're all in for a surprise." I smiled back at her, eyes unreadable. "That's exactly right." I walked to the projector with measured steps, like someone lighting candles at a funeral. I inserted the drive, waited for the soft click, and pressed play. The first 3 minutes were warm. Familiar. Birthday cakes with uneven candles. Toddlers smeared in chocolate. Group hugs at barbecues just like this one. Evan and I on our wedding day, his hand on my waist, my eyes filled with a belief so absolute it hurt to look at. The audience cooed and chuckled. Nostalgia is a drug, and they were all high on it. At minute 4, the music began to shift. The acoustic guitar faded into a slower, more ominous piano note. Barely perceptible. Intentional. The slideshow paused for a beat, just enough to create tension, then continued. The first screenshot was of a message from Evan's burner phone. "Jay, wish you were here. I still remember the way you sound when I touch you. Timestamp, Hotel Indigo, 11:13 p.m. A few people laughed awkwardly, assuming it was a joke. The next image was a selfie. Evan shirtless, in a hotel mirror, holding the phone like a teenager who hadn't yet learned shame. Then the messages between him and Tasha began. "Tasha, don't worry about Clara. She's clueless. Just act normal tonight. Evan, she bought me new sheets. Thinks it'll fix things. She's so desperate it's sad. Tasha, LOL. Maybe she'll finally get the hint when you stop faking it in bed. Gasps. Audible. Tangible. Someone dropped a glass. The slideshow continued. A screenshot of a hotel booking confirmation. Evan's email. Tasha CC'd. A photo of the mystery woman, blurry but clear enough to make people shift uncomfortably in their seats. A side-by-side comparison of the necklace Evan had claimed he lost and the same necklace visible in a social media post of that woman just days later. And then? Tasha again. Tasha, you should really tell her soon. She's starting to suspect. Evan, I'll do it after the next family thing. Don't want to ruin your barbecue. The next slide was an image of Tasha and Evan at a restaurant, captioned "Just siblings catching up 2 hearts," posted the same day as another text from Evan, "She's upstairs crying. I'm downstairs with wine. You win." The final frame lingered. A black background. White text. One simple message. Sometimes silence isn't peace. It's patience. Then the screen went dark. The silence that followed was complete. No one moved. No one spoke. Tasha's face had gone pale, her mouth slightly agape like a woman frozen mid-laugh. Evan sat rigid, eyes darting between the guests as if searching for a script that had suddenly changed. And I stood there. Not triumphant. Not cruel. Just still. I let the silence breathe. I let it stretch and settle, wrapping around the gathering like a shroud. Let every person in that backyard sit with the truth, not as something whispered or speculated, but as something seen. I didn't make a speech. I didn't need to. The room had already heard enough. I turned to leave, brushing past Evan as I did. He grabbed my wrist, his grip tight but shaking. Clara, what the hell is this? I met his eyes, and for the first time in our marriage, I didn't flinch. This, I said, is what it looks like when someone stops pretending. Then I pulled my arm free and walked away. No one stopped me. They were too busy pretending they hadn't seen this coming. But I knew better. They'd just never thought I'd be the one to say it out loud. I didn't look back as I walked away from the barbecue. I didn't need to. I already knew what I'd left behind: smoldering silence, seared reputations, and the bitter aftertaste of a truth too sharp to swallow. Let them sit in it. Let them stare at the ashes of the fantasy they built on my back. I had no interest in applause, no hunger for sympathy. This wasn't vengeance. This was release. When I reached my car, I slid behind the wheel with hands that didn't tremble and a spine that didn't bend. I exhaled once, long and low, and felt the weight begin to loosen from my shoulders. I didn't cry. I didn't rage. I just sat for a moment, letting the night wash over me like rain on a freshly wiped window. Clean. Quiet. Unapologetic. I went home, packed a bag, and drove to a small hotel an hour out of town. It wasn't glamorous, but it was mine. For walls that didn't hold secrets. Sheets that didn't carry the scent of betrayal. A room untouched by the hands that once promised to love me while weaving lies behind my back. That night, for the first time in years, I slept. Not just laid down and closed my eyes. I truly slept. Deep. Undisturbed. Without flinching at shadows or flinching from dreams. The next morning, I was at my lawyer's office by 9 a.m. sharp. She greeted me with a look that said she'd seen my kind of heartbreak before, but not this kind of calm. She offered me coffee. I declined. I wanted clarity. Not caffeine. I want to file immediately, I told her. Irreconcilable differences. I have documentation. I want a full asset freeze. I want my name removed from every joint account. And I want it all done today. She didn't ask why. She simply opened a folder and began. I handed her the drive. The same one I used for the slideshow. Inside were copies of text messages, voice recordings, photos, hotel bookings, and screenshots of Tasha's complicit laughter. Proof. Not that I needed it anymore, everyone had already seen enough. But I didn't want justice built on gossip. I wanted the kind that came with legal ink and cold signatures. Clara, she said, glancing at the evidence, you understand that with this, you're not just leaving. You're dismantling. This is the kind of file people try to bury. I looked her in the eye. I'm not here to bury anything. I'm here to end it. By noon, papers were drafted. By 2 o'clock, the preliminary account freezes were in place. By evening, I had locked down every shared card, redirected every auto payment, and rerouted my direct deposits to a new account under my name only. Evan hadn't noticed yet, he was too busy running damage control, spinning tales of emotional confusion and misunderstood messages. He hadn't realized the game was over before he even reached the next move. The text started that night. First from Evan, we need to talk. Please. Then again, more urgently, you blindsided me. That wasn't fair. I didn't respond. The next morning, I got one from an unknown number. Tasha. You're cruel. You didn't have to humiliate us. You could have talked to me. I stared at it for a full minute before deleting it. Talk to her? About what? The slow erasure of my marriage while she watched and helped orchestrate it? The gaslighting? The quiet digs, the whispered smirks, the careful choreography of exclusion? No. They hadn't wanted a conversation. They had wanted cover. And I wasn't that anymore. Word spread fast. Faster than I anticipated. Within days, I started getting quiet messages from Evan's extended circle. A few of his coworkers. An old college friend. Even his cousin's wife. Clara, I just want you to know, we always kind of suspected something. I'm so sorry. We didn't know how to bring it up without it sounding petty. I saw the slideshow. You didn't say a word. That made it hit harder. God, it was brutal, and perfect. People offered support, sympathy, even apologies. But I didn't need them to rewrite history. I just needed them to stop pretending they hadn't seen the signs. Some of them probably did. Most chose to look away. The silence that used to suffocate me had become my sharpest tool. Because when you're quiet long enough, people assume you're soft. They assume you'll absorb and forgive and endure. But silence isn't surrender. Sometimes, silence is the deepest kind of strategy. Tasha's fall was swift. 2 of her top clients canceled their contracts. One cited a desire to avoid unnecessary public attention. Another simply said, we prefer to work with professionals who understand boundaries. Her name stopped appearing in wedding hashtags. Her inbox stopped filling with influencer requests. The digital praise that once propped up her curated life began to evaporate. Slowly. Then all at once. Evan didn't fare much better. His social media profiles went dark within a week. A few of his friends tried to rally behind him, painting him as a man going through something complicated. That didn't last. You can't unsee the receipts. And no one wants to risk their own relationships by standing beside a man exposed for mocking his wife while smiling at the camera. He sent one last message. This isn't who I am. I didn't bother answering. Because that's exactly who he was. Just because he got caught doesn't make it less true. I spent the next month reclaiming things piece by piece. My time. My name. My voice. I updated all my accounts. I signed the lease on a quiet little apartment with a sunlit reading nook. I joined a yoga class, not for the zen, but for the fire it lit in my core every time I exhaled through something difficult. I pulled my grandmother's dishes out of storage and served myself pasta on a Tuesday night just because it felt decadent. I played music loudly, danced barefoot in the kitchen, burned incense without worrying he'd say it gave him a headache. I wore red lipstick to the grocery store. I smiled at my reflection, not because I believed I was whole again, but because I finally recognized the woman looking back at me. She wasn't the same. She was better. She was free. I ran into Evan once. At a bookstore. Of all places. He looked older. Not in years, but in spirit. Diminished. Like someone used to being listened to who now only hears echoes. He walked toward me slowly, with hesitation carved into every step. "Clara," he said. I didn't stop. I didn't slow. I just met his gaze, nodded once, and kept walking. Because I didn't owe him closure. He already saw the ending. I didn't need to explain the chapters. He wrote them with every lie. Every time someone tells me I was brave, I smile politely and nod. But it wasn't bravery. Not really. It was necessity. It was self-preservation. It was choosing my sanity over their comfort. They told me I was paranoid. No. I was observant. And patient. And finally, free.